When I bought this property in the countryside, I wanted peace and quiet. What I didn't expect was a neighbor from the HOA complaining that my cows were shitting in her house, even though the woman lived half a mile away. Living in the countryside has always been a dream for me. Peace, tranquility, no traffic or shady neighbors, just me, my cows, and the sound of the wind passing through the fields. Well, at least it was supposed to be like that. The problem is that even in the middle of nowhere, there's always someone who thinks they can run other people's lives. This story began when a woman who thought she owned the place decided that my farm was a problem for the neighborhood standard. Yes, because clearly in a rural area, having cows is absurd. It turns out that this woman was part of the HOA, the damn neighborhood association that made up ridiculous rules about how each house should look like a perfect replica from a real estate catalog. The detail? I never signed anything to be part of that circus. My property was here long before this association came along with its ridiculous demands. And, just to be clear, my house was on a gigantic plot of land, surrounded by miles of pasture and a few neighboring farms. But that wasn't enough to stop the woman from showing up one day, knocking on my gate as if she were demanding rent. The reason? According to her, my cows were shitting in her house. Yes, she said so in no uncertain terms. Now, here's an important little geographical detail. My farm was half a kilometer from her house, and it wasn't even an ordinary house. It was a condominium mansion, built after some of the city's rich decided that it would be charming to live close to nature, but without actually being part of it. The place was a festival of synthetic grass, decorative white fences, and people who thought cricket noise was noise pollution. And there she was, standing at the entrance to my farm, demanding that I remove my cows because, in her words, their waste was affecting their quality of life. Now, think with me. How exactly can a cow shitting half a kilometer away affect someone's home? Were they beaming manure onto her living room carpet? Or did the laws of physics somehow work differently for Madam, and the wind only blew the smell exclusively in the direction of her delicate nose? I looked at her, hoping for some indication that it was a joke. But no, she was serious. The woman really believed she had the power to decide which animals were allowed on my farm. The best part was when she pulled an envelope out from under her arm and handed it to me, as if she was suing me. Inside was a fine from the HOA, claiming that my herd was causing environmental disturbance and that I would have to remedy the situation immediately. I laughed. It wasn't even teasing. I just couldn't hold it in. There was so much stupidity concentrated in one person that it took my brain a while to process. How does someone have the nerve to go to a farm, look a farmer in the eye and say, "You need to get these animals out of here because they poop"? The woman crossed her arms impatiently, as if she thought I was going to apologize, and immediately put all the cows in a moving truck. But, to her surprise, my answer was quite different. I took that envelope, tore it in half, and threw it on the floor right in front of her. And then, as if the universe was backing me up, one of the cows nearby chose exactly that moment to drop a big present right next to the fence. The woman looked at it as if she had witnessed a war crime. But that was only the beginning. I knew that someone with that mentality wouldn't give up so easily. And I was right, because a few days later, she came back. And this time, she brought reinforcements. If there's one thing I've learned from living in the countryside, it's that nature doesn't care about city frills. Cows shit wherever they want, the smell goes wherever the wind takes it, and no one is going to throw a bucket of lavender perfume in the middle of the pasture just because a neighbor with too much free time has decided to declare war on biology. But, apparently, some people think they can just call the shots, even with the laws of nature. The woman is back, and this time, she brought reinforcements. The morning after our first meeting, I expected some kind of retaliation. People like that never take no for an answer. They believe that if they cry enough, reality will adjust to their wishes. But what I didn't expect was to see 3 black SUVs parked at the entrance to my farm, with a group of people dressed far too formally for a place where boots should be a must. And there she was, in the middle of the group, with the posture of someone who thought she was the queen of the revolution against the bovine empire. I watched from the balcony, sipping my coffee, as a plump, balding figure in a jacket got out of the car with a clipboard in his hand. From the looks of it, now I wasn't just dealing with a crazy woman, but the bureaucratic elite of the HOA itself. I took a deep breath. This was going to be fun. The bald man walked up to the gate, straightened his glasses, and cleared his throat, as if he was about to announce that I should vacate my land by order of the king. "Sir, we have received several complaints about the environmental impact caused by your animals. As representatives of the HOA, we are here to resolve this problem amicably." I kept myself from laughing. They were talking as if they were dealing with an oil spill in the ocean, not some cows living on a farm, which, by the way, existed even before this damn neighborhood association came along. I crossed my arms and feigned consideration. "Complaints? Because as far as I know, the only ones complaining are you." The woman butted in, with that arrogant tone that only people who are used to bossing others around can manage. "It's not just about me. Other residents are also bothered by the smell, the visual pollution, and the possible contamination of the soil." Now it was my turn to blink, confused. "Visual pollution," she snorted, as if I was an imbecile for not understanding the concept that cows in the countryside were an aesthetic affront to her world of cement and hypocrisy. The bald man resumed his speech, apparently thinking he could be more convincing. "Sir, we are willing to offer you a deal. If you agree to remove the animals from the property, we can negotiate financial compensation to help you adjust to the association's guidelines." That was the highlight of the day. They wanted to pay me to remove my cows from my farm because they didn't match the ridiculous decor of their artificial condominiums? The answer was already on the tip of my tongue. But before I could say anything, one of the cows approached the fence, calmly chewing on a tuft of grass, with no idea that it was the pivot of a territorial dispute worthy of a bad soap opera. And then, as if helping me to emphasize my answer, she lifted her tail and dropped a big treat right on the ground, a few meters from the group. The woman's expression was priceless. The sheer horror on her face made every second of that encounter worthwhile. The HOA was not prepared to negotiate with nature. I embraced the scene with gusto before giving my verdict. I'm not removing anything. My land, my cows, my rules. The silence that followed was delicious. The woman closed her face, as if she was holding back from exploding. The bald man snorted, as if he had expected this answer, but still insisted on his pathetic attempt to appear in control. "That's not a smart decision." "Oh, good." Now came the veiled threat part. "Smart for whom?" I retorted. "Because, as far as I can see, the only ones wasting their time here are you." He exchanged a look with the other suits, and I saw the frustration growing on their faces. They knew I was right. They knew that, legally, they couldn't force me to do anything. But people like that can't stand to lose. The woman clenched her fists. "This isn't over yet," and she left, followed by the rest of the group of suits. I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried something worse. These kinds of people never give up without one last shot. And I was right, because 2 days later, someone called in the environmental authorities to investigate my farm. And that's when the fun really began. If there's one thing I respect, it's creativity. And I have to admit, calling in the environmental authorities to investigate a farm because cows are being cows, that, my friend, is a level of stupidity and desperation that borders on art. 2 days after the last confrontation, while I was looking after the pasture fences, a white car pulled up at the entrance to my property. I had expected some kind of antics from the HOA, but I confess, I had never imagined that they would take it this far. Out of the car came a skinny guy in a wrinkled dress shirt with a notebook in his hand. He looked more exhausted than indignant, which was already a good sign that he wasn't there of his own free will. He approached, and, with a sigh, introduced himself as an environmental inspection agent from the city hall. We had received a complaint about irregular disposal of animal waste and contamination of the water table. I almost choked on my own saliva. Are you telling me that someone reported a farm for having cows pooping in the pasture? The agent didn't try to disguise his irritation. Yes, and believe me, it's not the stupidest thing I've ever investigated. There you go. Now I knew he wasn't the enemy. I asked him to follow me as we walked through the grounds. I could have made a fuss, argued, shouted, but I didn't need to, because what was going to destroy this accusation was not words, but reality. I explained how my property was registered correctly, how the cows were in an appropriate space, how there was sanitary control, and, above all, how there was no chance of their crap contaminating anyone's water table, especially a house half a kilometer away. The agent walked around the pasture, made some notes, observed the animals, and finally stopped by the fence, shaking his head. There's nothing irregular here. I know, but I bet the complaint came from a woman who lives in the condominium up there. The guy sighed. I can't tell you where the complaint came from, but he glanced at the mansions on the horizon. I can tell you that you're not wrong. That's obvious. Because, you see, these kind of people hate it when they don't get what they want. And when they do, the solution is always the same. Go up the stupidity scale until someone finally gives in. The problem is that I'm not that someone. The agent finished his inspection, signed a report, and handed me a copy. There are absolutely no infringements here. And that means she can't bother me anymore? He gave a tired smile. It means that this complaint was a complete waste of time. But if you're wondering whether this will stop your neighbor from trying again, I'm sorry, but I doubt it. Of course, because people like her can't accept losing. When one plan goes wrong, they're already planning the next one. And I knew this woman wasn't going to accept the humiliation of losing to a guy who didn't even recognize the authority of the HOA. And I was right. That night, around 10 o'clock, I received an official notification from the Dam Association. The reason? Excessive nighttime noise caused by livestock. I had to reread it 3 times. The woman was literally trying to fine me because my cows mooed at night. Yes, you didn't read that wrong. She wanted to punish me because the animals were making noise in the middle of a farm. I didn't know whether to laugh or bang my head against the wall. Did she really think she could fine nature? But you know what's funnier? The fact that if anyone here had anything to complain about, it was me. Because the real noise wasn't the cows, it was the ridiculous parties in her neighborhood. You know that kind of condominium where everyone thinks they're a big deal? Where the guys buy sports cars to compensate for their lack of charisma, and throw parties with DJs and fireworks just to remind their neighbors that they exist? Well, that's exactly what was happening. And at that very moment, while I was holding that ridiculous ticket, a group of drunken rich people in the condominium were setting off fireworks in the sky as if they were celebrating the end of humanity. I took out my cell phone and started recording. The sound of the firecrackers going off, the loud music, the exaggerated laughter, it was all coming from her house and her little friends. And then, the next day, I did exactly what she hadn't expected. I filed my own complaint against her house with the town hall. The reason? Disturbance of the peace and disrespect for environmental laws in rural areas. Yes, if she wanted to play by the rules, then let her play the game to the end. But the best part was yet to come. Because while the town hall was analyzing my complaint, the woman tried to do the unthinkable, invade my property to document the noisy cows. And guess who caught it all on the security cameras? That's right. Now, my neighbor not only had an official complaint against her, she was about to be charged with trespassing. And the icing on the cake? She had no idea what was about to happen. I knew this story was going to end one way or another, but I never imagined that my crazy neighbor would go so far as to invade my property, to collect evidence against my cows. But as luck would have it, or the irony of fate, she chose to do it right in front of my security cameras. And the scene? Well, it was perfect. The woman sneaked in from the side of my plot, stumbling through the mud as if she were infiltrating a military area. She held her cell phone like a private detective, recording every moo, every green pasture, every piece of manure, as if she had just uncovered an international corruption scheme. But then came the big moment. She got too close to one of the cows, and, as if nature had a razor-sharp sense of humor, the animal decided it was the perfect time to drop a gift just inches from her expensive shoes. Her reaction was Oscar-worthy. She jumped backwards as if she had stepped in lava, looked at her feet in absolute disgust, and let out a scream that made even the crows fly out of the nearby trees. And then, in the panic of fleeing the fecal war zone, the idiot tripped in her own haste and fell against the fence, knocking a chunk out of it in the process. I watched the video about 5 times in a row, laughing more and more. But you know what was even better? The fact that I now had clear evidence of trespassing. I wasted no time. The next morning, I went to the town's police station and did what any sane person would do in such a situation. I filed a formal complaint. I handed over the videos, described what had happened, and let justice do the work. The policeman who took my case watched the video with me and had to stop himself from laughing out loud. "So, the woman broke into your farm to film cows?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Exactly." He took a deep breath, scratching his forehead. "And ended up tearing down your fence in the process?" "Yes." He let out a long sigh. "I've seen a lot in this town, but this is new." And so, my neighbor got a police report all to herself, with charges of trespassing and fence destruction. But the best part was yet to come. The next day, while I was tending to the pasture, I saw a police car parked at the entrance to the posh condominium where this woman lived. And, like a gift from the gods, I saw the glorious scene of the police knocking on her door. You could hear the shouting from far away. The woman was furious. She was pointing in the direction of my farm, gesticulating like crazy, probably trying to play the victim. But the policemen didn't seem very convinced. And, well, they weren't. Because, at the end of the day, she was indeed notified of trespassing and received a fine to cover the damage caused to the fence. But the icing on the cake was when the town hall accepted my complaint against her house for disturbing the peace. Yes, remember that noisy party she and her neighbors had? The one I recorded and sent in as a complaint? Well, now the entire condominium was under scrutiny for excessive noise, and the neighbors who were previously on her side started blaming her for the mess. The whole condominium was in chaos. People began to divide between those who thought the HOA should get off my back and those who continued to think that the camp should bow to their idiotic demands. But the war didn't last long. With pressure from the police, the city council, and even the very neighbors who once idolized her, the woman began to realize that her influence was melting faster than ice cream on asphalt. So she did the unthinkable. She tried to sue the city for environmental negligence. Yes, she claimed that the city council was wrong, and that the cow problem was still a crime against humanity. The case? It was rejected immediately. And now, in addition to the fine and public shame, she was spending money on lawyers for nothing. That's when the chatter started. Neighbors commented that she was thinking of selling the house. Some said that the HOA no longer wanted her in charge. Others assured her that her husband was furious about all the money she had thrown away on this pointless fight. Then, a month after the mess, she disappeared. The house was put up for sale. The HOA stopped bothering me. And suddenly, the neighborhood was much quieter. That was it. She lost. The woman who tried to turn a farm into a legal problem was driven out by her own arrogance. And what about me? Well, I carried on doing exactly what I'd always done, living on my piece of land, letting my cows moo all they wanted, because, at the end of the day, some people think they can control everything. But nature always finds a way to put them in the right place. What did you think? Leave your like and opinion in the comments. We'll read them all.